reading this morning will be some selections from Luke and one from Isaiah. And I will intersperse them throughout the sermon this morning. This week's theme as we go through our Lenten journey is looking at Jesus through the eyes of various people in his life. Obviously, we come this morning to look at Jesus through his mother's eyes. Jesus could have entered the world in all manner of ways. He was God. God is God. But God chose Mary. Now, we Protestants haven't always known what to do with her. Thankfully, in more recent years, we have all come to a better understanding of who she was and what her role was in the life of her son. She did respond faithfully to what God asked her to do. So in that sense, Mary shows us clearly that God's work includes us. God used an ordinary woman. And so I start this morning with the first chapter of Luke, and I share with you two brief passages. Luke 1:30, and the angel said unto her, Fear not, Mary, for thou hast found favor with God. Now, I don't know about you, but if an angel appeared to me, uttered those words, I probably would have said, why? Right? Let's go to 138. And after a discussion, actually after her listening to the angel, verse 38 tells us this, and Mary said, Behold, the handmaid of the Lord, be it unto me according to your word. And the angel departed from her. We all heard that story. We all know it by heart. This morning, I ask you to think about that 14 to 16-year-old young girl having that experience and having the maturity and the courage to utter those words. Okay, God, I don't understand. I don't even know what I'm doing here. I just came to the side of the hill to get some peace in my heart. And what's happening? I don't know. But I know it must be divine. And so be it done unto me as God would have it in my life. That was a teenager. Whew. Interesting. Well, let's move on. 8 days after Jesus was born, Mary and Joseph took him to the temple. And here's the second piece of what we learn about Mary and the soon-to-be son. 21, and I'm going to skip around a little bit here, but this is important. And when 8 days were accomplished for the circumcising of the child, his name was called Jesus, which was so named by the angel before he was conceived in her womb. And when the days of her purification, according to the law of Moses, were accomplished, they brought him to Jerusalem to present him to the Lord. And Simeon, who had been prophesying and waiting for the Messiah, receives Jesus from his parents. And Simeon does this. They took him up in his arms and blessed God, and blessed, Lord, now lettest your servant depart in peace according to your word. This is Simeon. For mine eyes have seen your salvation, which you have prepared before the face of all people, alike to the Gentiles and the glory to the people of Israel. And Simeon blessed them, and then turned to Mary, his mother, and said this, Behold, this child is set for the fall and the rising again of many in Israel, and for a sign which shall be spoken, against. Yea, a sword shall pierce through your own soul also, that the thoughts of many hearts may be revealed. So here's Mary, still a teenager, and she is in the temple before one of the great high priests and the prophets. And at 16, 17, Simeon says, this child is going to have all kinds of trouble. And guess what? You, child, are going to have the same pain pierce your own heart. I don't know what I would do as an adult with that, let alone a young girl. Mary wouldn't understand Simeon's words until 33 and a half years later, would she? When she stood at the cross. And I don't know, but I can imagine that at some point maybe those words echoed in her mind. I don't know about you, but I can also imagine that anyone here who has lost a child can somewhat now enter into Mary's eyes as she finally got to that place at Golgotha and had to watch. I can't know that because I've never had a child. Some of us also can't know that if we've not lost a child. But I think that anyone who has lost a husband or a wife or a sister or a brother, a close family tie like that, might look for a moment through her eyes at what it took for her to endure that situation. Not knowing now for sure that what her son had been telling her would really come to pass. Yeah, we can learn a lot through Mary about a relationship with a child, about her relationship with other believers, and even about a relationship with non-believers. Let's go back 3.5 years for a minute. We don't know very much about Jesus' life between after they left the temple. We have one instance of Jesus being just before bar mitzvah age at 13 and being in the temple, teaching all the old guys stuff, and Mary was there with Joseph going, I've lost my kid. And then she finds him. I think you can relate to what it is to lose somebody you're looking for. Lose somebody that you are in charge of, that you are responsible for, that is part of your flesh and blood. Ever been there? You can lose them in Walmart today, you know that. Can't the same thing happen to you? When I drive that shopping cart around looking for the folks at the farm, I'll say, and I can't find them, I will tell you what, my heart starts going. Because it's like, what if they fell? What if they're lost? What? You know? And then you turn the cart and you go, I'm just going to check out, I don't care. And lo and behold, who's sitting there at the line? Yeah. Somewhat the same situation when Mary and Joseph, except much worse because they had traveled way away from Jerusalem and then thought he was with the caravan, right? Thought he was hanging out with some of his buddies and his friends in the back of the caravan. And when they figured out that through this crowd of people, have you seen him? Have you seen him? Have you seen him? Been there? I know you have. Okay. No, I haven't seen him. No, I haven't seen him. Oh my gosh. They turn around and they have to race back to Jerusalem. And presto, there he is. Didn't you figure I had to be like here doing what God told me to do? Can you imagine? Get in her head at that moment. All right? After that, we hear nothing until Jesus is 30 years old and he begins publicly his ministry. Let's do math, all you math majors. If Mary was around 16 when Jesus was born, and he is now 30, 30 and 16 is? Very good, you pass. 46. Let's get behind Mary's eyes now at age 46. She is about 46 when her son, who now we know, we surmise that Joseph has already died. So Mary is a widow and a single mom. And for those years, we can only assume that Jesus followed in his father's footsteps and became the carpenter in Nazareth and worked to support the family. And now Jesus comes and says, it's time for me to begin the journey that I was called here to do. I now need to go preach. I need to minister. I need to go save the world. Now, whatever language he used, we don't know. But imagine Mom this morning. She had come over 20 plus years to rely on Jesus, etc. And isn't it easy over time, gang, when you fall into that routine, and even though you know in the back of your mind that, you know, she had that experience with the angel and it was there and he said, and then Simeon told her those things about your son's going to endure hardship and whatever, but that was some 30 years ago. And look, for 30 years, it's, and then here it comes. Now, any kind of reactions could have happened, but here's Mary, who says, basically, you need to go do what you were called to do. And we see from her once again the faith of a woman that is believing what God had put in her heart. And so in a sense, she releases Jesus to go now on the journey that she was hoping really wouldn't happen. So here we are in Luke 4. He goes out to preach, and we have it on good authority that he started preaching around Nazareth and Capernaum, close to where he was. And imagine that the mom is sitting in the synagogue because she kept up with her faith and her Jewish tradition. And she's sitting in the synagogue, and one day she sees her son in the synagogue preaching. Now, all you moms out there, it's sort of like your kid being put on the honor society and getting a full ride scholarship somewhere. That's my boy. Do you know? That's my kid. Yeah? I am sure as she sat in the synagogue and listened to her son, even though he was preaching some things that kind of were strange and unusual and certainly were not Torah related in her mind, yet she sits there with pride and she is full of joy until Luke 4. And he closed the book, speaking of Jesus, and he closed the book and he gave it again to the minister and sat down. And the eyes of all that were in the synagogue were fastened on him. And he began to say to them, "This day is this scripture fulfilled in your ears?" And he went on to tell them, "No prophet is accepted in his own country, but I tell you the truth. Many widows were in Israel in the days of Elias, when the heaven was shut up for 3 years and 6 months, when the great famine was throughout the land. But unto none of them was Elias sent, save unto Sarepta, a city of Sidon, unto a woman that was a widow. And all they in the synagogue, when they heard these things, were filled with wrath." Uh-oh. What's Jesus doing? "Oh my son, what are you doing?" "And they rose up and thrust him out of the city and led him unto the brow of the hill wherein their city was built, that they might cast him down headlong." Whoa. So, ever been in a situation where you have started and there has been an event and it started out to be joyful and you were proud and it was great, and all of a sudden something unnerving happened and it turned terrible? There's Mary. Oh boy. This is not how it's supposed to go, God, really. You have to protect him. And Jesus, at that point, says, "But he passed through the midst of them and went his way. And he came down to Capernaum, a city of Galilee, and taught them on the Sabbath day. And they were astonished at his doctrine, for his word was with power." There it is. Wow. So, his own hometown threw him up. How's that through the mother's eyes? And the next village over, because he is on the path that his father sent him to, receives and goes, "Whoa, this is powerful stuff. It must be godly. God has to have a hand in this." And he carries on. Now, here's what we also know. Mary was unable to travel with them. She was not the itinerant mother. She had to stay back home and tend to the house and the kids. And so at that moment, she released Jesus. And I think at that moment, the mother understood that this was not going to be an easy path. The Gospels tell us very little about Mary during his 3.5 years worth of ministry. But we can imagine that she wondered and prayed and waited until John 19. Because finally, we know that Mary was at the cross. And so we go to John now. Yeah, I want to start. I was going to go with 24. I'm going to start with 25. "Now there stood by the cross of Jesus his mother and his mother's sister, Mary, the wife of Cleopas, and Mary Magdalene. When Jesus therefore saw his mother and the disciple standing by whom he loved, he said unto his mother, Woman, behold thy son. Then he said to his disciple, Behold your mother. And from that hour, that disciple took her into his own home." We know that Jesus, we can't know, we can't imagine, but we know that his eyes and her eyes met, and those words were, "Woman, now I will provide care for you." I think at that time she had to know Simeon's call to her so many years ago. And she was an Old Testament believer. And so I think she probably recalled Isaiah's words. So we go to the Old Testament to bring closure to what Mary knew about her son. Isaiah 54. But he was wounded for our transgressions. He was bruised for our iniquities. The chastisement of our peace was upon him, and with his stripes we are healed. All we like sheep have gone astray. We have turned every one to his own way, and the Lord hath laid on him the iniquity of all of us. Mary knew those words. She had read them. She had heard them. And I think through her eyes, she must have realized that her son also had to die for her, not just all the other people that he preached to, but that Mary herself was one of the people who Jesus was wounded for her iniquities, for her sin, and for the times that she had not believed her son or not believed the Word of God. And I think now we see that Mary had not just a mother and a son relationship, but a mother and a God relationship. And I do believe that that double whammy would have wiped out any human being. But yet Mary stayed at the cross and was with her son as she realized that he had to die this way, not just for the world, but for her. Wow. So let's include her in our Lenten journey from the perspective of an ordinary woman, just like any of you and I, who rose to enormously courageous heights to endure what God had simply asked her to do some 40 years earlier. Amen.